across the galaxy. This is where conspiracy on the wild side meets the perspective of a lifetime. This is the Free Zone with your host, Freeman.
Hello, all you wonderful soul-searching, system-busting spiritual beings out there, and welcome to the Free Zone. I want you to know that this show is a show you can bet on, and longtime listeners to the show did exactly that. They knew, because of the symbolic nature of our current situation on planet Earth, that it was no gamble to bet on American Pharaoh winning the Triple Crown. So, of course, this was all related to my Obama theories and connections to the Pharaoh Akhenaten, and, of course, all the different symbolic things that we have seen across the time that we've been producing all of this information. So it is applicable. You can actually apply the knowledge you're gaining here and win some money. But beyond that, we are all seeking our mission here on planet Earth and trying to understand our raison d'etre. We want to know that we are a part of the change that is coming to planet Earth. And part of that story goes extraterrestrial. And tonight's guest and tonight's story is strangely woven into my own story. I met a man named George Green, who claimed to be the financial advisor to Jimmy Carter, and then also a Bilderberger, but he turned his back on the deep underground military base for the coming apocalypse, to come forward and publish the spiritual teachings of the extraterrestrials meeting with Billy Meier in Switzerland. Now, it was at this lecture that I was asked to produce a television show, and the rest is history. So as this is strangely woven into my life, I understand that we are all seeking this message and this spiritual guidance. And to help explore this understanding, tonight we are talking with Michael Horn. And he is the authorized American media representative of the only scientific proven extraterrestrial contactee and prophet, Billy Meier. He has produced numerous films, such as Silent Revolution of Truth and his latest work, And Did They Listen? And he is a fantastic guest, and I'm so excited to have him here with us to share the prophecies of Billy Meier and the spiritual teachings of the extraterrestrials meeting with him. So, welcome to the show, Michael Horn.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Freeman. I appreciate it.
Well, you know, like I say, this has been wrapped into my life, and so I have to dig deeper, and I am an old UFO buff. And certainly the Billy Meier pictures are some of the most dramatic and convincing images of the time.
Well, yeah, I'd agree. I can tell you that there are none that are comparable, so I actually go beyond saying some. I say it is the most compelling, stunningly clear, still irreproducible physical evidence of extraterrestrial UFOs ever presented.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the skepticism, get that out of the way. I don't want to focus on it too much because I am more interested in the spiritual message of these extraterrestrials and the prophecies of Billy Meier. But I don't think it would be very good journalism if I didn't ask the hard questions.
Sure.
So, certainly, when we start to look at the Billy Meier pictures, they do seem a bit hokey. You know, they're a little bit Ed Wood, a little bit in 70s retro garb. And so one of the first ones, of course, that I'm sure you've had to battle over and over again is this wedding cake UFO controversy.
Well, that controversy is, for all intents and purposes, over. Just this last year, in 2014, an independent photo expert, computer, software user expert who teaches that application as well, 3D imaging, modeling, all that, did an independent, as I say, analysis of the Meier wedding cake UFO photos. And that analysis, which is 74 pages long, shows that these are not in any way, shape, or form models or special effects, but that they are large, unknown objects, in some cases that Meier photographed within 15 feet in broad daylight. Now, once these new analysis, well, I say these because he did an independent analyses on other elements of Meier's photographic evidence, but once this one in particular was released, and by the way, he posted with his analysis, he posted the protocols, the software, everything that he used, so that consistent with the scientific method, any skeptics or scientists, independent analysts could go ahead and reproduce the testing and protocols. To date, now that this has been done, there has not been one peep from any skeptic, including all those who in the past indeed attacked Meier's authenticity. There has not been one peep from any of them challenging now the authenticity of the wedding cake UFO. So that, unless somebody wants to come forward with a really credible documented rebuttal, that is yet again more expert independent authentication of Meier's singularly authentic extraterrestrial UFO photos.
Yes. Now, I didn't mention in the intro, and I meant to, that Billy Meier has been producing these photographs and prophecies for, how long has it been, 60 plus years?
Yes. He first published prophetic information in 1948 when he was only 11 years of age. His first photographs, which were taken in India of up to 8 craft at a time, were published in 1964. During that year, an independent journalist for a prominent Indian newspaper, the New Delhi Statesman, saw those photographs, wrote about it, interviewed Meier, etc., etc. So in the field of ufology, and I'm going to state this up front, in the entire field of ufology, there is nothing and nobody that even comes within 500 light years of Meier. And I will further state, since the times that are upon us now are quite pressing, there is nothing of relevance to us on Earth in all of the basically huge body of disinformation that I call the UFO CI, meaning the UFO community and industry. I will further state that while there have been verifiable crashes such as at Roswell, and while there have been some other photographs here and there or film clips taken of objects that are not terrestrial in nature, there is not one single piece of verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial manufacture, of evidence and information coming from any extraterrestrial intelligences or sources. So that having been said, I do put that on the line because we can no longer dance around and entertain all this stuff about so-called contactees and UFO cases. There's a reason for these contacts, which have been going on for 73 plus years, and it isn't to give me a career as a speaker or a UFO researcher or anyone else. It is to get the truth to humanity out about, what truth is about all the circumstances and situations, historical, political, religious, and the rest of it that pertain to our life on Earth.
And that is an important mission. And we're going to get deeper into this understanding of what the Plejarans are trying to tell us in their spiritual message. I actually ended up with the mimeographed version of Handbook for a New Paradigm. And go ahead, please.
All right. Well, I'm going to address that since you brought it up. I wasn't going to say anything unless you did. But that information is not from the Plejaran. It's George Green's information that he either created himself or piggybacked off of Meier's material. He is not considered by the Plejaran and Meier to be a trustworthy and credible source. That doesn't mean that there aren't elements of what he's published that may or may not be true, but he is not in any way, shape, or form endorsed as a credible person by Meier and the Plejaran, specifically contrary to all of the claims that he has made of his connection to and endorsement by the Plejarans and Meier. So that's in the For What It's Worth department. It isn't up to me to, do a battle with George Green or his claims. But if you want Meier's actual information, you have to get Meier's authorized information. And believe me, there's plenty of it to keep anybody busy for quite some time, determining the authenticity and credibility, etc. of it.
Well, Meier is represented as a prophet, and even related to, say, Elijah and Emmanuel in concept of bringing forth knowledge that is necessary at the time. And as a prophet, he was also given knowledge of when he'd lose his arm or when his time of death. His prophecies are intriguing to me, and I hope we can go over some of it. Thinking about the 100 years of tribulation that he says that we will have to go through before humanity actually finds their path.
No, actually, it turns out to be more like 800 years. With there's now not all of it is of the same level of severity and brutality and intensity, but for the next few hundred years, according to this information, especially because we have ignored, suppressed, and attacked it, and neglected to even look into it, because of that, we will have hundreds of years of grief that otherwise would have, could have, and should have been avoided by us. And a huge burden of that responsibility falls not just on the shoulders of the religions and the politics and the intelligence, the secret services who've tried to not only discredit but literally assassinate Meier. It falls squarely on the shoulders of those people that can call themselves UFO researchers, investigators, and the community, et cetera, which clogs up the information channels with dead-end, circular, never to be resolved information of dubious quality.
Well, every time you say that, I can't help but think of Raw L and their spread in Playboy,
Right. Spread in Playboy, no pun intended. Yes, indeed.
I mean, obviously they're getting mainstream press.
Well, they are, while they do get mainstream press, they don't get as much press as many others in this overall, and I use that term, specifically industry, who create and churn out enormous disinformation. And I will name among those Exopolitics, Stephen Bassett, Open Minds TV, Stephen Greer, the Disclosure Project, MUFON. The list goes on and on. And unfortunately, those are the most prominent parties that suck up the atmosphere in the room, the breathability of truth, and suppress it for their own petty, self-serving, profit-oriented motives, and keep the truth from the public. And I have personal experience with each of the aforementioned, and if they don't like that, they can sue me for saying it, but it is the most despicable charade. This disinformation, the cover-up, the real UFO cover-up, is now solely about the Meier material, and it is solely, most effectively, promulgated and promoted by those parties. That's why you can't get, information easily, freely, in the mainstream press about the Meier material. And then second to that would be parties like SETI, who I have taken the trouble over many years to contact and provide information to, but they are cowardly, profit-oriented individuals who do not want to find what they claim that they're looking for.
Well, yes. Well, it does seem that there is a form of disclosure on the way, with the Vatican, the UN, and the Royal Society all coming forward with their contact meetings that they've been having on extraterrestrials. The Vatican, of course, the Jesuit priest and Vatican astronomers coming forward with all of the "we'll baptize ET when he shows up." It seems the world is being prepared for a disclosure, but I, like you, don't believe that this would be any truth.
It won't be. It is all, remember, these are all self-serving, power and profit-oriented entities. The Vatican happens to know the truth about the Meier case, about who Meier really is. And even 3 years ago, the Plejaran told Meier, and we published it at the time, that the Vatican would start to use elements of the Meier material, not for the purpose necessarily of spreading the truth, but to bring more people into the fold. That is what has happened. As recently as last year and this year, they've come out for the environmental causes. They've come out to stop overpopulation. There was something again recently where they were advising on something else straight out of the Meier material. Look, these are people that do not want the truth to come out, because then they, like the UFO industry, goes out of business.
Right, absolutely. And Billy Meier had predicted a number of things, and one was the chip. There are some intriguing things inside of the transcripts that I hope we can go over. But
it's endless.
Yeah. It will go on and on. So Billy Meier has a relationship with Emmanuel, with the ideas of Jesus and Muhammad and the connections to UFOs there. So let's jump on that real quick.
All right. Well, Emmanuel is the real name of the man who was falsely called Jesus Christ, an individual who never existed and for whom there is not one singular piece of historical documentation, which is a very unusual thing, considering that at the time that he supposedly lived, which means at the time that Emmanuel lived, there were over 60 historians in the overall area who never wrote about anyone named Jesus Christ, his supposed miracles, and all the rest. All of this was concocted long after the death of Emmanuel, which did not take place on the cross, even though there was a crucifixion. Emmanuel died at the age of about 110 in India. He traveled there after surviving the crucifixion. And indeed, the same spirit that enlivened the prophets, Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad, who was also a true prophet, whose teaching was also corrupted, as it was the case for the previous five in relationship to him. All of these people, these personalities, were enlivened by the same evolving spirit that enlivens the seventh and final prophet, Billy Edward Albert Meier of Switzerland, who lives today at 73 plus years of age in that area.
Well, there were some things inside of these transcripts, inside of the concepts that were being brought forth through Billy Meier. And so right along what seems to be the New World Order's plan, it seemed that within the Billy Meier transcripts, we had ideas that would promote global governance, a New World Order, with the U.S. as a global police force, and even discussion of population culling. So can you address any of this?
Well, yes. As you say, going back decades, Meier was first warning. Actually, his warnings in 1958 were specific about the U.S. and the EU, which didn't exist yet at that time, but he foretold it. They would be the two dominant forces that would lead the attempts to biochip every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth. That's in that document. In 1981 and 1987, Meier speaks more about other international events, including that in 1987, he foretells the attack on the World Trade Center. He speaks about the ensuing military actions by the U.S., military, political, economic, to try to bring everybody under the U.S.'s economic, political, military control under the guise of peaceful globalization and fighting terrorism. He also foretells that the attack on the WTC will not be the only one. As a matter of fact, that ensuing attacks of terrorism against the U.S. will be so unimaginable in terms of their scope to the world's population, but that they will come about as a result of the incessant meddling in other people's lives and the policies and conduct of peoples and countries that has been going on by this country for a very, very long time. So we find ourselves now looking at the provocations that are being continually stirred up by the U.S. and the EU against Russia. Now, while Russia is not some angelic force on earth, during my last meeting with Meier, which was not too long ago at all, a couple of weeks, he re-emphasized that this unrelenting provocation by the U.S. and by the EU, with Merkel, who is a puppet of the EU, being, dancing to our tune and all this, that if this isn't stopped, we will probably see a next, and he calls it the fourth, not the third, the fourth World War. And this, of course, should this come about, as is also prophesied in those documents going back to the 80s, etc., this would be something that would unfold into such a horrendous, unstoppable, worldwide military action and destruction that barely anybody would be left on Earth. And this is only one of the unfortunately intense and dramatic, circumstances and situations threatening humanity at the time, militarily, environmentally. We have not listened. I called that film, and did they listen? No, they didn't. We didn't, as a mass of humanity, listen. We were too smart, and still are too smart and too smug. Even the people in the various communities that you'd think would be most desperately interested in just finding out if this is true, have cynically and stupidly ignored, suppressed, attacked the information so they could pursue their profits, and that profit being spelled with an F-I-T, not a P-H-E-T. So to answer your question about all that, that he's foretold, the biochipping, the destruction, unfortunately, we are following that script at this point unfailingly to greater failure.
All right. And was there a belief that we have too many people on the planet Earth and that it would help to cull the planet a little?
It's not about culling. This is something that we have to be very, very careful about, because the idea of population reduction falls into this very conspiratorial realm. And we can always discuss, and at any point if you want, the idea of, people, the so-called elite, what Meier also calls the dark order, that are, pulling strings in the background, and this idea of population reduction or culling. What we're presented with from the very beginning of Meier's published information is that we are overburdening the planet through overbreeding, overpopulation. Now, people have to step back, put their emotions, on back burner for a moment, and understand some simple realities of science and biology. We live on a very finite space. We live on a ball, a globe, not an endlessly extending horizontal plane of, infinite possibility for productivity and sustenance, for disposal of waste products, et cetera, et cetera. We live on an Earth, that has a nature to it. It is a natural, immensely complex, phenomenal bit of business that we exist, hopefully, in compliance and cooperation, understanding and appreciation for enough. However, that isn't the case. We think that unbridled breeding and population is something that we can do without consequence. If you want to really test that theory out, you get a terrarium. You get yourself one of those lovely round globe-like things that you can pack a bunch of earth and plants and some water, whatever in there, and start introducing more and more organisms into it. Put insects in there, or small life forms, worms, whatever you want, and keep on putting more and more life forms in it, even these primitive, relatively simple ones, and watch how soon it kills itself off, where it cannot any longer provide for the basic nutrition, nor can it dispose of the waste products, etc. Human beings don't understand that there is, quote unquote, a natural order that we could determine, we could discern, if we did as Meier and the Plejarans have long recommended, that is, if we would simply observe nature and see how it doesn't overburden the environment with ceaseless overproduction of life forms. There's always a balance. There's, in nature, there's prey and predator. There are seasons for things. There are things that require a certain amount of space and nutrients to grow. we produce human life at a rate that is infinitely more rapid than the rate at which the earth itself produces sustenance, growing time and seasons, as well as I said, the ability to assimilate and dispose of the waste products of all of these life forms, plus all of the animal life forms that we breed in order to create food for ourselves. These life forms, in many cases, producing vast amounts of methane gas. This is an interrelationship, but let's come back to the very question. So the Plejarans say no. If you grasp that you are suffocating yourselves, that you're actually creating the strife, the wars, the pollution, all these things that put you at each other's throat, that have you vying for resources that are ever dwindling, if you realize that, what you would do is you would cease your births for about a 7-year period. At this point, I believe that's the number. You would let the natural attrition of people living and dying take place without producing more human beings to replace them. You would keep this in place, if nothing else, this birth reduction cessation, until you had reached certain numbers planetarily. Now, all of this, of course, to the so knowledgeable scientists and all of the conspiracy theorists sounds so frightening and terrible and all the rest, because they don't even ever think about what it would be like to live in real abundance, without competition for resources, with the resources being clean and pure, with there being enough to sustain everybody, without the need for this relentless overbuilding, overpopulation, pollution, etc., etc. It's so simple that only a child at this point can understand it, because people have become so knowledgeable in their pseudo knowledge gleaned from the internet, which is rife with conspiracy theories and know-it-alls, etc., that they've lost the ability to reason largely. So let me stop at that, because challenges to all of this, of course, are welcome.
Yes. And I hear you. And, that whole concept of focusing on nature and realizing what the natural processes are and how all of that goes really boils into mystical teachings and brings us to the ideas of magic and mysticism. So I'm curious a little bit about some of the elite, some of the world leaders that have claimed contact with extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings. Hitler and the SS and the Thule Society, they had claimed contact with masters. Aleister Crowley, he was another who had made contact with what seemed to be an extraterrestrial source.
Well, according to the information in the case, and I like to say that frequently because there are things that I do not have personal knowledge of. I haven't been able to either determine the truthfulness and validity or the lack thereof, because the information can lie in the far distant past or the as yet unarrived future, and it's not accessible to me at this point, or I have not found access to it. So let me say the following. As far as Aleister Crowley is concerned, he was a man who ran what we would call evil to extreme ends. I don't know that he was assisted in that. If he was, it would have been by, and not in any direct personal contact, but only in what are called impulses, by what was called or is called the Ba'ath or the Giza intelligences, an extraterrestrial group that were indeed until 1978 based underneath the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and who were an energetic force behind the Thule Society, behind Hitler, though they may never have necessarily actually physically met with any of those ETs. again, it could be possible with a couple people from the Tula Society that they had met with one or two. But again, these Giza intelligences, these are human beings. They were a splinter group of extraterrestrials from the same lineage of the Plejaran. They had been based on the planet for thousands of years. In their ranks was none other than one whose name we would associate as being Jehovah, the god of the Hebrews, Israelites, etc. There were other gods involved, Kamagal 1 and 2, first and second, others, but these names would not be familiar to us unless we were familiar with the Meier material. These human beings were based under the Great Pyramid, and their agenda was to gain control over everybody on Earth through religious means, ultimately leading to a fake one world government, one world religion. This was, as I say, this was in the work for millennia. And one of the things about it was they were not trying to reduce population numbers. This is where people have got to think about this. You see, if you are a member of the elite, if you're a powerhouse, terrestrial or extraterrestrial, in order to rule over people, you have to have people to rule over. So you can't indiscriminately wipe out the population of the Earth, because if your agenda was simply to take over the planet, that coulda, woulda, shoulda been done eons ago by these or other extraterrestrials who had the technology and weaponry and could have done it.
Very true.
But, right? So the problem is that you need those to serve you. You need, a workforce, if you will, whether they know they're serving you or not, to do your bidding. And of course, with a fake one world religion, had they been able to institute that and compel people to believe in this, and they would have had multitudes of people doing their bidding. If they wanted to, at that point, institute a slowdown, a ceasage of birth, because they too wanted to enjoy a cleaner planet, whatever, they could have done that. But they didn't get that far because that was stopped by the Plejaran. But understand, for people who are all bound up in this thing about the elite themselves, let's say those who are the Dark Order, the military, industrial, financial, paramilitary, Secret Service complex, which isn't a unified group. It's a number of powerhouse entities. I use that word meaning quite human, earthbound entities here, human beings, who are very powerful. They don't all necessarily cooperate with each other. They struggle for power with each other as well. But their agenda is to control. They have no direct contact with any extraterrestrials. And this nonsense, disinformation spread by the imbeciles in the UFO community about aliens working at Area 51, little grays walking around carrying their trays in the cafeteria down there, whatever. This is utter nonsense. Logic alone tells us that any domination-oriented extraterrestrial race, extraterrestrial meaning that they have the means, technology, long lifespans, etc., to get here, superb weaponry and all the rest, any of those that could abduct people, and it isn't the ETs that are abducting anybody, it's secret military, but any of the ETs that could do any of these things, they don't need to make agreements with ours, power-hungry military industrial complex in any way, shape, or form. They could certainly do anything they want and eliminate our militaries if that was part of their agenda. So these people that make their careers babbling about this nonsense have never themselves thought it out, and it's disinformation. So that being said, I'll stop for a moment because it's just too easy to go on, in my own incredulity about how much junk and garbage has been spread by these people.
Wow. Well, you definitely hit on a bunch of the points in my notes. I was definitely interested in the Giza Plateau entities. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, of course.
So there are transcripts of Billy Meier's that are still kept secret. Are these ever going to be released, or is this information that's held only for the inner clique?
Well, no. It's not so much that they're held secret. There are some things that you would say maybe he has been told he may not some things that he may not publish and all of that because of things that we would misuse. We're not ready to be responsible to handle certain information, and so I just think that they have been wise and decided that it is best that we do not have access to certain things. Now, that being said, most of Meier's information, almost all of it otherwise, is available. It's in German primarily. Thousands of pages have indeed been translated into English, but it is solely the responsibility of the human beings of Earth to go ahead and translate that which they want to know. It's not the obligation of Meier or the FIGU, the people in his group that assist him, or the Plejaran to go out and do that for us. The language it's been given to us in is German, and then it's up to us to go ahead and do the translating. And a lot of people have. It's just that it's a very expensive process. We have to understand that to translate this information, people either have to volunteer, and many have, or professional translators have to be employed, and that is expensive work. And even when that occurs, it isn't always successful and accurate, German being a complex language, because German is complex, highly specific, and far, far more sophisticated than is English. And so, in many cases, for many years, incorrect, misleading transformations made their way into English and other languages because of this problem. So this is a real life circumstance where, there are no perfect masters. This is all a bunch of new age hooey, ascended masters and all the rest of this stuff, or ascended misers, whatever you want to call them. What really takes place here is the Plejaran are highly advanced human beings, far advanced to us spiritually, technologically, but they're not perfect. They're human. And that's the nature of life in this universe. All levels of development of human beings, from the most primitive to the most advanced, but all are still human until they reach another level. We don't even have to worry about it at this point in our history. And so we all make mistakes, including the Plejaran. Now, they don't make factual scientific mistakes. Fortunately, we've been able to prove the authenticity of the Meier case based on their accuracy. But they can make mistakes in researching something, or mistakes in identifying somebody, things that need to then be corrected and are corrected. However, most mistakes connected to the Meier material have been made by translators in incorrectly translating something. So there's enough grief to be dealt with on that level.
Right. Now, why were they written in German?
Well, because, as I say, first of all, Meier. And
was it Meier that wrote these, or the Plejarans?
Meier, here's the process that takes place. Okay. Every time Meier meets with the Plejaran, the conversations are recorded. Now, that's not so hard to do, but they use devices that are far more sophisticated. And since Meier, since he was a child of 5 years of age, was taught telepathy and how to recognize over 3 million symbols that are sent, pictograph symbols sent to him telepathically. These symbols convey a concept, or words, a concept, an idea in and of themselves. So what happens when Meier's had a contact, subsequent to that contact, afterwards, at a certain time, sooner or later, he sits down, originally at a typewriter and now at a computer, and because he has one hand, he receives the conversation through a device that telepathically transmits the entire content in symbols form to him, that he simultaneously translates into German while he types it out at up to 100 words a minute in German with one hand. German is a complex language to type because every noun requires capitalization, unlike in English. And many of the words are, multiple characters long, 10, 15, 20 characters long. So Meier transcribes these conversations pretty much then verbatim. Now, they have to be checked for accuracy later because this comes at Meier as a stream of information that he has to sit down and get basically in one pass. He can go back later and with the help of the Plejaran and with some people that he works with who will just help do some of the physical correcting, they will correct terms or words that were taken down wrong by him. He's a human being too. So he can only do so much, but his accuracy rate, while it's enormously high, he is subject to typos and things like that as well. So that's the process by which that is done.
Amazing.
It is amazing, and we have in our films we show him doing this typing. You'd think that we sped up the camera, but we didn't, and you can tell because there's music playing in his office in the background. And when you listen to the music happens, it's amazing because the music is in real time and Billy's hand is, flying across the keyboard there.
Wow. Yeah, so that would definitely lead to some of the new technologies like the neurophone and ideas that are coming forth.
Well, the neurophone is an invention of Dr. Pat Flanagan.
Right.
And Pat Flanagan, did that, his work and his invention on his own. And while for a time he was claiming to, quote unquote, channel a dead extraterrestrial or a dead earthling, which is impossible, it's all his own work and his own, he's a very interesting and intelligent person. As a matter of fact, I had the experience to sit in some of his seminars with him. That's over 20 years ago at this point. But no, he does it himself. Whether he even knows that or not is another matter.
Right. Yeah, I love Flanagan's work, and his work on the pyramids was quite amazing as well. One of the early things that I was getting into. Well, I'm curious about Billy Meier himself. Now, here is a man who has openly claimed as a prophet. Does he now have apostles following him? Is there a secret society forming around him?
No. I'm sorry to laugh because
It's okay.
I know Billy. I just had my 15th visit with him. He's just a very, very down-to-earth, real human being. Now look, what I should say is this. There is a group officially called FIGU, which is a free interest group for the study of ufology and spiritual teaching and what have you. And these are people who voluntarily come to spend their time, their energy, contribute, donate, anything they want to do to help Billy disseminate his information, primarily focused on the spiritual teaching. This is really what the whole thing is about. He has these people who've come into his life. Some of them came in more than 30 years ago, up to 40 years ago, to help him. Now, these are human beings. They're primarily Europeans. In the core group, there are people from a couple other countries who are participating in that core group, I think from Japan and maybe Africa at this point, who have had this calling to really dedicate intensely their time, energy, resources to this work and are capable of doing it. People think, oh, well, I could be a contactee. I tell you, no. There's nobody could be a real contactee. They couldn't do anything within light years of what Meier does. And it would be hard enough for them to carry the burden of the self-obligated mission, if you will, of all these people that work in the core group. Now, those people, because they're human beings, they have their own various levels of knowledge, challenges in their own knowledge. If some may still have remnants of beliefs, I mean, these are just human beings, but they, as students of the material and the spiritual teaching, they work to focus, to clean up their own thinking, to evolve their consciousness, which is the meaning of life, the evolution of consciousness, according to Meier. And so they are also fallible, as Meier is. Meier has one vote in that community, and they always discuss everything that they're going to act on. They have to have unanimity or they don't do it. And so there are people that disagree with Billy about things. There's times Billy's been wrong about something. It's just the way it is, because this is about human beings. So all of this imaginary cultic apostles religious connotation, because people are so steeped and conditioned like Pavlovian dogs into the illogic and pathological mind enslavement of religion, they figure, oh, prophet, that must mean religion, that must mean this. No, it isn't that way. So second, in terms of participating in closely with the Meier materials, what's called passive members, meaning people like myself who voluntarily want to do more. We're not going to go to Switzerland and try to become part of this core group that spends endless hours of their time, pretty selflessly churning us out, but we'll find a way to do what we can. We'll contribute voluntarily. We'll contribute a small tithing, or we'll go over there or we'll go and work for a few days, 3 days, with people in Switzerland to enjoy the camaraderie and to learn and to participate and contribute. This is purely voluntary. Nobody is knocking on anyone's door, soliciting them to join, and to give money. This is just like any organization where you say, hey, I want to become part of that particular group, club, organization. I want to dedicate some time. That's up to me. I'll tithe to them a fixed amount per year, whatever. I'll go and work, or I'll pay to not work, whatever. That's voluntary. So people could, if they say, well, I don't like the fact that people are going to give money to this. Hey, don't do it. No one's twisting your arm. As a matter of fact, if anybody wants to get their head straight on the Meier material, my site, my blog, those linked from it are loaded with absolutely no strings attached, free information. You can read and study to your heart's content till those Swiss cows come home and never have to spend a penny. If that's what you want to do, hey, great, you want to buy my film? And if any of your listeners want to buy a film of mine, all they have to do is include your name in the order. I'll send them 2 for 1. Wow. That really, literally, yeah, there it is. Other than that, this stuff, we virtually, are just going fingers crossed. Please, avail yourself of what's free. What else can we tell you?
And just for the folks, that website is theyfly.com. Very simple, theyfly.com. And you can see all the images. Of course, I've included them there here on freemantv.com for you to look at while listening, so that you can see the images of these flying saucers, of the Plejarans themselves, and a lot of the amazing photographs that Billy Meier has brought forth. And just to remind you all listening that these photographs were taken long before digital enhancement, and that is why they are pretty much incontrovertible. They're impossible to fake. So, that's what makes this whole story so amazing. And I can't wait to get deeper into the teachings, the spiritual teachings of the Plejarans. I wanted to side note over to social engineering on the extraterrestrial situation as we kind of wrap up this first hour. Because, E.T. movies, when they came out, they were horror stories back in the beginning. They had scary aliens. They were coming to destroy life on planet Earth. And then this situation in the Hollywood scene, and we all know this is social engineering. It's programming for culture. And the ETs suddenly started to become friendly ETs, like Spielberg's E.T., the movie. But now we're moving back into this dangerous alien agenda again that is constantly leading to doomsday. Even Spielberg came out with Falling Skies to show us Americans in refugee situations being attacked by these extraterrestrial situations, right? And we have all this doomsday scenarios going on within the ET movement. And it sounded like you had something, but I was so this social engineering of friendly to angry aliens and back again is is one that I think is setting the stage for the dream of Ronald Reagan, the idea of unifying the world under this one single threat that can attack the world. So what do you have to say to this type of social engineering, the culture of movies, and how this alien doomsday is playing out?
Sure. Well, according to what Meier said himself, the agenda pertaining to this started around the First World War, and actually from the 20s on, when the earliest type of alternative craft actually were in development, highly secret. And when this worldwide networking of still quasi-independent secret societies, dark orders, what have you, to develop this technology, all of this has been perpetuated to create fear. And as you said, this whole thing about the ET invasion, the agenda here is primarily centered around the weapons industry as well, to just continue to crank out more and more weapons and high tech. So the stuff that already exists is beyond our imagination. We don't know about it, most of it. I've heard certain things from some other people who happen to have been in intelligence and military and who've verified this for me. This whole thing is rather insidious, and people like Spielberg or Lucas, or let's just speak of Spielberg since he's the one right now, who sell out to perpetuate this doom and gloom, horrible alien thing, are doing the bidding of the intelligence, military, industrial complex, all of this dark order stuff. You would think at a certain point that enough is enough when you're a multi-gazillionaire. Maybe although Spielberg, like Orson Welles and H.G. Wells decades ago, maybe they've been threatened with death, and they and their families, if they don't continue to churn out this garbage. But, it's a dead-end course that we're on here, Freeman. It's like we are suicidal in our greed. We are strictly, insanely suicidal. We are not going to be able to circumvent, to outsmart the prophecies. This information, this accurate foretelling, the warning, the advising, comes from infinitely wiser sources than any of these profit-hungry, small-minded people who have let whatever talents and abilities that they have be corrupted in the service of greed, by promoting fear and all of these ugly aspects, when they could be promoting beauty and enoughness and abundance and wonderful things in our world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there is an extraterrestrial tale that tells just that, and it was so marginalized no one ever heard of it, but it was a Disney film called Mars Needs Moms, and it was starring my good friend Dan Fogler. We think that film got yanked from the running because it did show this positive message at the end, and it's a Disney film no one has ever heard of, although it's current. And I find it amazing because the end tale is the family core, the family unit, and how that can help survive. But the Plejarans and Billy Meier brought forth one particular warning, and I found this one very amazing because I also somewhat predicted this event, and that is the arrival of Apophis, or what the Plejarans called the Red Meteor.
Right you are. Yes, in 1981, Meier was given information about this incoming object, and very specific information. As a matter of fact, it's so important that we made an illustrated online comic book of it so people could visually grasp it, could get it.
I have that image there as well, just so you know.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. By the way, before I forget, I want to come back to something when you mentioned your friend who's the actor. If some people who have any degree of prominence in the world of entertainment, celebrity, movies, showbiz, whatever, singers, rappers, would be willing to look at the Meier material and mention it publicly. They don't have to tell everybody, it's the most amazing thing since sliced bread, but to start to bring it to public attention, that right now, I'll just tell you, is the only chance I see that we can avoid this destruction. We need massive numbers of people hitting their keyboards and going, Billy Meier, what's this? And then they get to make up their minds for themselves. Otherwise, we're going to have what's long been foretold. And part of it is Apophis. And I'll tell you what has happened here. With this red meteor that they predicted and all, that's in 1981. Then in 2004, scientists discover the incoming asteroid they call Apophis. And of course, NASA says, don't worry, it's just going to pass us a couple times in 2029, 2036, won't hit the Earth. Yeah. So over the years, we've put out Meier's warnings and stuff. And what the Plejarans specifically called for was a true international effort to deflect it so that it did not impact where it's going to hit otherwise, between the North Sea and the Black Sea and the Eastern European area. Well, NASA could probably care less, thinking, of course, that we live on a big extending sheet that runs out into infinity in space, not on a round object where something of this magnitude happens, it's going to affect the whole world, which it would. So a few years ago, a couple of years back, the Russians and Chinese, after we published this information, put out press releases, they called for a joint effort to deflect it. So we knew they were listening, because one of the Plejarans also told Meier that the Russians do read his information. Up to the higher levels, they know about it. Now, how much of it they take to heart or not, I don't know, but it looks like they took that to heart. Now, just a couple of years ago, suddenly NASA did something interesting. It changed its estimate of the size of Apophis, to within 25 meters of what Meier was told, out of nowhere. Another thing that happened, an astronomer who likes to attack the Meier case and alternative information, astronomer named Phil Plait, who was, kind of yucking it up about the Meier material, suddenly called for serious research into protecting from incoming objects. I think even Apophis may have been one. So these pompous know-it-alls now are having to go, we don't have to acknowledge Billy Meier. We'll call for something here. Now, here's the latest development. And I'm talking to you and your audience. If anybody really wants to get involved proactively, it's so easy to really turn the tide if people will only participate. There's something called Asteroid Day, a film called Asteroid Day coming up to debut June 30th online and all this. Now, the producer and director of it is a German guy living in the UK. I've reached out to him. I friended him on Facebook. I started to post some of this information there. I'm waiting to hear back from him, because someone like that, someone like probably any of the actors could literally change the course of human history. Here's how they could do it more easily than I. You see, I've been doing this research for 36 years. I've been very active publicly since 1987, 88, promoting, speaking about, lecturing. So I'm a voice directly associated with promoting this material. When other people who are independent of this start finding it and speaking up, they can do more now with all that we've got for them freely available than I can in some ways, because people get cynical about someone who's promoting information like this. So this is all going on right now, and make no mistake about it. If we do not listen to the Plejaran, the likelihood that this thing smashes into the Earth and changes the face of life on Earth in 2036 is very high. Now, some people say, oh, that's just so far away. Yeah? How far away is it 21 years if you're 20, 30, 40, 50? Still, you're here for it. Your family, your children, grandchildren, and not only that, here's where this interconnection, because this whole thing now with Asteroid Day could be used to awaken the world to the Meier case. All these scientists who wouldn't listen when I sent them stuff, they're now involved with this guy's project. We could tip the balance, and in so doing, millions and millions of people would also find out what Meier long foretold about the IS, the Islamic State, dating back to 1958, that's unfolding on the world right now. They could find out about the coming attacks on Scandinavia and the US and Canada from Russia, long foretold by Meier. They could find out about some of this environmental upheaval And I think we're going to see some of these mega elements this year that are so huge that they are going to change the face of our world. And we could start to prepare for things realistically like the coming Northwest earthquake, 9.0, 5 minutes long, and tsunami, the coming destruction by earthquake of San Francisco, already photographed by Meier, the foretold, absolutely certain eruption of Cumbre Vieja earthquake in the, or Vieja Cumbre, sometimes reverse it, I'm not sure, in the Canary Islands, Las Palmas region. We would be able to wake ourselves up, humanity, and receive and utilize this free gift to humanity given. Understand something, people. There's nothing that extraterrestrials want from us. They don't need our polluted world. They don't need our corrupted, degenerate genetics, emotions, and behaviors and thoughts and wars. They are giving us something with the hope that we will have just the necessary wisdom available to assure our own future survival.
Well said. Very well said. And that is a great place for us to move into the message of the Plejarans. So members, please join us in the members section. And remember, if you have any issues with your membership here at freemantv.com, write me at Freeman at freemantv.com. That's Freeman at freemantv.com. We will see you all on the other side.